What is going on YouTube and Diablo fans? My name's Andreas and as always welcome back to Mana and Motherboards. So today we are going to be diving into a topic that I think is very relevant and very important at the moment, and what we are going to try and do is draw a conclusion on the state of the Echoing Strike skill and the Echoing Strike build for the Warlock in this PTR public test realm for the patch 3.2 in Diablo 2 Resurrected. So we've tested it for a few days, almost a full week of the PTR, and we also had a very good theory crafting session last night on live stream, trying to get the most out of the new Echoing Strike skill and the reworks and all the changes and nerfs that have been implemented for Echoing Strike. So the first question you might ask yourself is, why are we looking at a sorceress? So what I've done here is create a Nova Sorceress and a self-wheeled Infinity high-end S-tier Nova Sorceress, just to give myself a bit of perspective as well as a baseline and sort of goalpost to aim for with the Echoing Strike build. So the Nova Sorceress, in particular the self-wheeled variant of the Nova Sorceress, is a very strong S-tier build in Diablo 2 Resurrected, and as you can see we have an Infinity that we are self-wielding, Skin of the Viper Magi, Griffins, a Crazy Caster Amulet, Stone of the Jordans, Arachnids, Mage Fist, Crazy Boots, an inventory with a Lightning Sundered Charm as well as Lightning Skillers, all res small charms, Torch Annie, offhand we have CTA and a Spirit, and then for our Merc we just have Insight, Fortitude and Dariel's. Quite a common setup there. So we have a fully decked out Nova Sorceress, and we are on Players 8. I'll quickly show you right now. We are on Players 8 difficulty and we have terrorized Act 4. So what I would like to showcase, these are lightning immune monsters that I'm fighting right now, just as a disclaimer. But what I'd like to do is just showcase how this build does on Players 8 difficulty in a terrorized zone with this sort of end game S-tier setup. So as you can see, it doesn't really struggle very much with these mobs and monsters. It does fairly well. We could use static to further enhance our ability, but I'm just sort of showing you a pure and simple version of this. So we have a high level energy shield, we have 2500 mana and about 500 life, and we are probably doing around 5000 damage with our Nova at the 105 FCR breakpoint. And this build does very well. It's very good at AoE. It lacks a little bit in terms of single target, but it does have static to assist you there. And overall this build is just one of the all-time greats in the S-tier sort of category for Diablo 2 Resurrected. And this gives us a great benchmark. We could have done a Hammerden, but I just thought this would sort of give us a clear indication of a really proper S-tier build. So if we have a look here, this is a Herald pack, which is quite a tough pack for a S-class or S-tier build that focuses on AoE clears, but we will give it a bash taking down this tier 1 Herald anyway. So we are almost done with this Herald. We have used static a little bit, and now we are just using our Nova to bring down the last bit of health there. So this is just to give us this benchmark like I mentioned, and also just give us a good idea of how an S-tier build should perform on Players 8 in Hull difficulty. So let's go to a couple of monsters that aren't quite as lightning resistant as what we were just fighting. I mean, that's Players 8 difficulty. As you can see, it absolutely wrecks. I'm quickly going to drop the difficulty down to Players 1, just so you can see how effective it is on Players 1. So I think it's important, and it definitely was important for me, to just get a perspective once again on how powerful builds for other classes in Diablo 2 Resurrected function, because I feel like the current season 13 of Diablo 2 Resurrected was a bit skewed because of the power levels of the Warlock and the Echoing Strike build in particular. We have another Herald here. It is on players 1, so it should take a little quicker. But it was a very skewed sort of perspective with the current Echoing Strike build that was implemented or released with the Warlock in patch, or I can't remember what the patch name is, but the current season 13. So this is much more what the power level should look like at players 8 in a terrorized zone in Hull. So what we're going to do now, I think you've seen enough of this Nova Sorceress, and we all have seen a lot of Nova Sorceress over the years, but just to familiarize ourselves and sort of gain a fresh perspective, I think that was important. So what we're going to do is jump onto our PTR Warlock now, and we have sort of optimized this, in my opinion, to a fair degree in terms of being a physical damage focused Echoing Strike Warlock. So just to go over what that is, there are two variants of this build in my opinion. There is the physical damage variant and the Hex Purge magic damage variant, and I'll show you both of those to give you an idea of how the Echoing Strike Warlock is functioning at this current point in time. So what we have on our physical variant of the Echoing Strike Warlock is a Breath of the Dying in a Warpike, an Eth Warpike. It is indestructible because of that Zod rune. It has those dual leeches to keep your sustain in a good spot. We have a Hull Warden's Will with the new physical, I can't remember, Protector's Stone I think it's called. We have a Metal Grid Amulet for that important attack rating that we need. It also gives us an Iron Golem, which allows us to make an Insight Iron Golem, an Ethereal Insight Iron Golem, and I think this is a good amulet now with the current changes to Echoing Strike. We have Enigma as our armor, and Ars Dul Mephistos with an We have Soul Drainers, which are very important for the dual leech, as well as that minus to monster defense. I think that is going to be a quite commonly used set of gloves in the coming season. And we have a faster cast rate ring with some mana leech, Arachnid's Mesh, and a Ravenfrost again for that attack rating, the dex, and just the Canopy Frozen stat is also very useful. We then have Gore Riders, an inventory full of Aldrich Skillers, a Latent Bone Break, some Aureus Small Charms, and Annie, a Torch, CTA, and Spirit on switch. We have enough strength in our, or enough points in strength to wear our gear, the rest into Vitality, also a bit into Dex if we needed it. And then looking at our breakpoints, we are hitting that 80% faster cast rate, so the breakpoint is 75, so we are just over that. And we have, yeah, that's basically the important stat that we are looking for, at least to reach that 75% breakpoint. Then onto our Merc, we are using a Pride Mercenary for that concentration aura to maximize our physical damage. We also have a Chains of Honor and an Andariels on our Mercenary, and that is a Might Mercenary, so we can also further enhance our damage. We then, for the Demon, have one of the most important parts of this build, in my opinion. If you are doing the physical variant of Echoing Strike, having a Cursed and Cold Aura, or the Holy Freeze Aura enchanted demon, that is the best way to maximize your damage output by proccing that 5% chance amp damage as much as possible through the use of that Holy Freeze Aura on mobs. This enhances your damage and is the biggest increase to damage that this build can have. And with the new changes that make it so difficult to bind a new demon, this really becomes somewhat of a issue to find a particular demon, also because of the skill point investment in order to get a super unique demon to bind. So we'll go over the skills quickly. We have one Intersigil Lethargy, so that we can better hit our enemies by minusing their defense. For the Eldritch skill tree, we have maxed out Echoing Strike, Blade Warp, and Mirrored Blades, and then 1 into Hex Purge, and that is the Eldritch skill tree. We then, for the Demon skill tree, have 5 hard points into Demonic Mastery to have 2 demons, 1 to consume and 1 to use the Bind Demon. We have 1 point into everything, 5 hard points into Demonic Mastery, and then 20 hard points into Bind Demon, just so that we could get our super unique with Holy Freeze and Curse. So this, in my opinion, is the most sort of damage you can achieve and output with the Echoing Strike Warlock in the physical damage variation. So what did I just put? I don't know why I put that token there. That's not what I was trying to do. I want to use a Deep Wallstone Shard to terrorize Act 4 here. I just need to see, are we still on Players 1? So we're on Players 1. I'll quickly show you what Players 1 looks like over here. What did I want to do? I've shown you the stats. I think I've shown you everything I need to. We're quickly going to buff up with our Battle Orders Battle Command. We are then going to do our other buffs like our hexes and summon and consume our Goatman. And here we can sort of test out how Echoing Strike is doing. So as you can see on Players 1, with this variant we're doing probably around 20k damage once Might and Concentration kick in. We'll just wait for that to kick in and you'll see our damage change. We really, so we get to about 19k physical damage with this variant of the build. On Players 1, we really just rip through everything. It's doing fantastically, but with that being said, we are using very high-end, very end-game expensive gear. So again, what you could do is use an Ariok's Needle instead of Breath of the Dying. I think it also works incredibly well. I haven't tested what I would consider the best in slot setup yet, but this is very close to what I think could be optimized for the current sort of configuration and meta for Echoing Strike. So what we're going to do, you can see this power level on Players 1. We're going to change it up to Players 8 and show you how this build performs. So keep in mind how the Nova Sorceress that we showcased at the beginning of this video performed, so that you can sort of hopefully keep a bit of a perspective in mind now in Players 8 with this Echoing Strike build. So I think this has very comparable kill speed to that Nova Sorceress, and both of them are using very high-end versions of these characters. We found a nice little facet there. I have forgotten to use my Sigil Lethargy so far. We have a Herald that's just spawned here, and as you can see, its damage output is very similar to that Nova Sorceress when it comes to hero killing. We did just have our Golem die there. That does happen. It's not the end of the world. We have enough leech to not really care about the insight that the Golem provided. We just want to keep our demon alive and our mercenary. And yeah, this does take a little while to kill heralds. I think that is something that has changed a lot in this patch and this sort of current PTR. And we're just going to show you a bit more of Players 8 gameplay here. I think at this sort of ultimate setup for this build, it does perform adequately on Players 8. Like I mentioned, it performs just like a Nova Sorceress, a self-wheeled Infinity Nova Sorceress. So you are up there in the S tier in terms of damage, and your survivability is great as well. The one downside, in my opinion, is it does take very good gear to get to this point of comfortably killing and clearing in Players 8 difficulty. So that is where I find the biggest drawback to the Echoing Strike build to be in the current state of things, is just how much investment into your gear you need in order to get a reasonable clear and kill speed. So, I mean, the gear that I showed you, I'm quickly going to switch over to this Breath of the Dying again. I think it might be a little bit more damage. It definitely has more sustain. That will keep us going a bit better here. I'm going to need to buff up again very soon as well, but this is just to give you an idea of what's going on. I'll try get to Diablo as quickly as possible so we can see a Diablo kill on players 8. As you can see there, we are taking some damage. Our demon is taking some damage. We do want to keep him alive because our damage will be more than halved if we lose our bound demon. I don't think I'm going to take out this Herald pack. That might take a bit long. What I am going to do is just buff up again over here. Just do all of our necessary buffs. There can be quite a few of them. And let's carry on with this chaos run. What I am also going to quickly do is just engorge for my demon in order to keep him alive, because it is so difficult to find a good bound demon that you definitely don't want to let them die. So I think players 8, this is doing admirable damage. It's on par, if not better in some cases, than a Nova Sorc, which would also put you very much on par with a Hammerden, which is widely considered as the best build in the game, barring the current Echoing Strike and possibly Mosaic Assassin, or not possibly. The Mosaic Assassin is, I think, the strongest build in the game, but that is no longer in the patch or the current season 13. So we're just going to do Lord Desace now, and then we can move on to Diablo to show you what it is like to kill an act boss, a tough act boss, on players 8, terrorized with this Echoing Strike variant. So my problem with the Echoing Strike variant that I will highlight later on in the video is that for the physical variant of this build, you really struggle in the early game as well as with mid-level sort of gear. It only really comes online when you have really good gear and you have that demon with Holy Freeze and Cursed Affixes. Before then, you really do struggle, and the build does not scale well with mediocre gear. You definitely need great gear in order to get the max out of this build. So, have we left one of the seals? Yes, we have. Oh, there we go. So, let's do Diablo quickly, show you what his single target damage is, and then we will get into the Hex Bane variant of this build. So as you can see here, your single target damage is reasonable. It's nothing spectacular by any means, but it does get the job done. It's definitely nowhere, there goes our mercenary, definitely nowhere close to what it was at one point, but it still is very reasonable. I hope my demon survives that. Yes, he does, but we are going to respec anyway, and we will lose our demon then. So, do we have enough gold to resurrect our merc? I sure do hope so. Not enough gold. We got 6,000 gold. What can we sell, guys? What can we sell? Maybe a couple protector stones. Let's get that going. So whilst we are just selling some items here in order to resurrect our mercenary, I'm just going to explain a little bit about the Hex Purge variant. So now that Echoing Strike doesn't scale as well as it used to with skills or with your gear, what we need to consider is alternatives to get as much damage output as possible, and how we can do that is by fully maximizing Hex Purge. And you'll see when we go into the Hex Purge variant right now that it's hardly an Echoing Strike build anymore. It is very much a Hex Purge build with using Echoing Strike as a delivery method or system for that build. So going over the skills very quickly, we will put 1 Intersigil Lethargy for this variant using Hex Purge, and that is again for our best chance to hit our enemies. for the Eldritch skill tree, we will be putting 1 into Hexbane, 1 into Hex Purge, maxing Hex Purge, maxing out Hexbane because it is a damage synergy for Hex Purge. We'll be putting enough points to get to Mirrored Blades, which we will we will max, and that is so that we can get our full amount of echoes for Echoing Strike. We then need to max Eldritch Blast in order to get as much damage as possible from Hex Purge. And then lastly, what we are going to do is get enough points into the Demon skill tree so that we can consume a Defiler to get as much magic damage as possible. So we're going to summon that Defiler in order to boost our magic damage for Hex Purge. With our remaining points, we're just going to put them into Echoing Strike so that we can get as much damage doing our Echoing Strikes as possible. There are other variations that you could do with these skills. You could put them in the Demon skill tree. That's up to you. So that is how we spec this Hex Purge variant of the build. I just want to put a couple points into my stats here so that I can see what I need in terms of gear requirement. So we need a little bit more strength, so we're gonna heavily focus on magic damage, and we want our cast rate high, so we're using a Fortitude. We're going to use a Hull Wardens with the Guardian's Light magic jewel. We are going to be using a Geeds for that minus to enemy magic resistance. We are also going to use a Wraith Step with Eldritch skills, again to maximize our Hex Purge. We're going to use Trang Ools instead of our Soul Drainers, or we'll see about that quickly depending on what we sort of lay out and set up here. So we are going to use an Opal Vein ring, we are going to use a Sling ring. What are we setting on in terms of damage output? So again, we're only hitting the 75% faster cast rate frames depending on how we spec out this build. So is that our setup? I think that is. I just want to check my faster cast rate frames. We are at 135, but we are lacking leech. So what we might do is put on our Soul Drainers. And again, when we were using Soul Drainers for the physical variant, we could have put on Laying of Hands instead and have our leech from our Breath of the Dying weapon. That would have been an option for a little bit more damage as well, but it's really up to you. So what we are going to be sitting at now is the 115 breakpoint, so we can maybe change out Metal Grid for a faster cast rate amulet. 2 to Warlock skills. So we'll put our Metal Grid down there, so our attack rating will be a little bit less. What we'll do is put on a Raven Frost just to assist with that, and that will sort of be our setup for this magic variant of the build. So let's dive into another Player's 8 Terrorize game with the Hex Purge variant of the Echoing Strike Warlock. So this is a faster cast rate breakpoint, that's just one thing to be noted, and it is also very much focused on magic damage, not physical damage. So if you look, our Echoing Strike is only doing about 5k compared to that 20k that we were doing in the physical variant of Echoing Strike. So we are on Players 8, we are Terrorized, we are going to just buff up here, and then we have to put on our Hex Purge, and we're going to consume a Defiler, not a Goatman. So summon a Defiler and consume it. If you have a look, we are reaching that 125 faster cast rate. We have minus 52 to enemy magic resistance and plus 31% to magic skill damage. And we are doing about 8k damage from Echoing Strike in terms of physical damage, with a little bit of magic added to that. But as you'll see, the explosions from our Echoing Strike with Hex Purge does a lot of damage. So if you have a look here, I just need to see, what did I put on? Open Rain, Raven Blast, Life and Manage. So, as you can see, our Hex Purge is doing all of the heavy lifting for us here in this variation of the build. And in my opinion, it is killing just as fast, if not faster, than the fully optimized, full damage, physical Echoing Strike build. And that is my biggest issue with Echoing Strike at the moment, that Hex Purge and putting all of your investment into Hex Purge does better than fully investing into Echoing Strike. So in my opinion, this is more of a Hex Purge build than a Echoing Strike build. And that's where my problem comes in. All the other builds for the Warlock at the moment seem stronger than Echoing Strike with similar investment. And when it comes to Echoing Strike, the best variant of it is Hex Purge. So you aren't even really playing Echoing Strike, you're playing a Hex style build. And I just think that's a little bit disappointing that Echoing Strike isn't the main focus of the Echoing Strike build. It's just a delivery system. So I'm just trying to survive this onslaught from this Herald over here. But this build does do incredible damage, but again, it's just a very one-sided type of build where you are just focusing on your Hex Purge. And I don't think that is the most sort of fun optimization of this build. I just need to buff up again quickly. We did lose the mercenary, so we are losing a bit of damage in that sense, but I mean, as you can see by ourselves, we are focusing on magic damage, so that concentration aura from our merc isn't helping us all that substantially either with this variation. So we'll quickly get to Diablo and show you what he's like on a single target. He's probably still better than the full physical variant of this build, but it also isn't the best single target build, that must be said. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below. What do you think of Echoing Strike at the moment? My biggest issue, like I mentioned, is how it doesn't scale well with mediocre gear. It needs really high-end gear to operate and to function at its most effective and efficient. And it's just sort of a bit of a... It was hit a little bit hard with that NERF stick. I think that it could have been done a little bit differently. Somehow, if they could balance the early and mid-game sort of damage scaling of Echoing Strike so that it felt better at those points and not only come online in the absolute end game. I think that would be the best scenario for Echoing Strike, and I do have to swallow a bitter pill and say that I was wrong in my initial evaluation of Echoing Strike and saying that it was still in a very good space and it was still a highly functional, very good build. It has sort of dawned on me through further testing that Echoing Strike does need a bit of attention and love at this point in time. So I will admit I was wrong in a previous video saying that Echoing Strike was in a good spot, because it does require a bit of work, I think, to be in a good place. It is in a good place in the end game with very good gear. Anything before that, it is lacking quite substantially. And with all of that being said, I think I've definitely sort of over Echoing Strike. It was too powerful in patch or in the current season. It is not in the best of spaces now, and I think the Fire build is a lot better. I think the Abyss build is a lot better. I like the Tainted build. I like Blood Boil. Echoing Strike, I'm a little bit sort of jaded and conflicted with, and it is in, like I said, a good spot in the end game. Anything before the end game, Echoing Strike isn't really in a good spot, and I hope that this video showcased that for you, and also just showcased you a bit of perspective for you with a Warlock versus an Echoing versus a Nova Sorceress. So ultimately, please share your opinions down below. I would love to hear that. I think that, you know, as a community, the more we talk about this, the more Blizzard will potentially listen and make some changes accordingly. So just again to run through, I think that the physical variant of this build sucks before complete endgame gear in conjunction with a Bound Demon that has Holy Freeze and Curse, which is definitely a must for this build in order to do any sort of decent damage. I think the Hex build performs really well, but it is a Hex build, not an Echoing Strike build. Echoing Strike is just a delivery system for the Hex, and I don't really like that, in my opinion. I don't think they should necessarily change Hexes, but possibly how it interacts with Echoing Strike and how Echoing Strike works. I think Echoing Strike is the issue, not Hex. And then also just managing the damage scaling for Echoing Strike. It needs more punch in the early and mid game and early end game, not only being effective all the way at the high end best in slot gear sort of phase of the end game. So yes, I do feel like the other builds for the Warlock are feeling better at this point in time. If you have liked this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. I hope this sort of showcased a bit of what I wanted to conclude on with the Echoing Strike Warlock. We also have a new member portion of our YouTube channel. If you'd like to support the channel further and get exclusive content, member-only content, member-only games and streams and all of that sort of stuff, please consider being a member. Other than that, I really enjoyed making this video for you. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you again very soon for some Mana and Motherboards. Cheers!